Day 942 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 642,000 military personnel losses, representing an above average 1,500 losses in the past day. Then as for the Russian hardware losses, a similar theme here, with the loss of 22 tanks, 52 APVs, and 63 artillery. And it's an above average day, to be sure, but many of these figures are still quite conservative, and I'll circle back to that statement shortly, right after we take a look at the biggest events on the map today, because in a series of highly effective drone strikes over the weekend, the Ukrainian forces have dealt significant blows to two of Russia's largest ammunition depots, deep within Russian territory, where these strikes targeted critical storage facilities in both Krasnodar Krai and the Tver Oblast, all as part of Ukraine's escalating efforts to disrupt Russia's military supply chains. The first and most damaging strike hit the Tikhoretsk ammunition depot in Krasnodar Krai, one of the largest munitions storage sites within Russia. This depot, which held thousands of tons of ammunition, including rockets and artillery shells from North Korea, was set ablaze by Ukrainian drones. And the destruction didn't stop at the depot itself. An adjacent airbase and a podlet radar system used to detect air targets and aid in the defense of the site was also obliterated. The explosions also sent munitions scattering up to 10 kilometers away, as you can see here, as shown by one distant local. Now, Tikhoretsk plays a vital role in resupplying Russian forces across multiple regions, particularly in the Donbas and Crimean Peninsula. The depot's strategic location, sitting at the heart of Russia's rail network, allows it to funnel supplies directly to frontline troops in southern and eastern Ukraine, where the facility also reportedly stored a great assortment of munitions, far from just artillery shells, but rocket launcher munitions, and also for the storage of missiles used for the S-300/S-400 Russian air defense systems. As such, the destruction represents a significant setback, potentially crippling Russian supply routes and forcing a re-evaluation of their logistics strategy. Then, in a similar vein to the Tver Oblast of Russia, a good 500 kilometers north of the front lines, Ukraine's Security Service, or SBU, carried out another successful strike on the 23rd GRAU arsenal in Oktyabrsky. Now, this ammunition depot, located just 10 miles south of the recently destroyed 107th GRAU arsenal back on the 18th of September, saw fires and explosions that were reported throughout the facility, causing extensive damage to one of Russia's longest-standing military assets. And like Tikhoretsk, this depot served as a critical point in Russia's military supply chain, servicing the south, which is Ukraine's northern border. Thereby, this destruction further compounds the challenges Russia faces in sustaining its war efforts. Now, despite claims from the Russian Ministry of Defense that 101 Ukrainian drones were intercepted, both sites were devastatingly affected. The implications of which means that these latest attacks highlights Ukraine's increasing precision in targeting vital Russian military infrastructure, particularly now its ammunition depots and supply hubs. So we are looking at a minimum of 3 Russian arsenals struck in the space of 5 days now, with a reported 30,000 metric tons of Russian stored ammunition directly impacted by these events. All of which leads to a flow-on ripple effect on artillery and armor usage, highlighting the growing strain on Russia's resources on various offensive or defensive fronts in their SMO. But back to the Tikhoretsk incident in Krasnodar Krai, with what a flame ball that one was. Looking almost as catastrophic as the Toporets depot event from the 18th. Some shell hunger will be felt from the Russian forces after this latest, or truly these latest series of events. Ukrainian President Zelensky said of it, quote, "Ukraine's precision strikes on enemy military assets is what fundamentally changes the situation, our ability to bring the war back home to Russia." So these targeted Russian arsenals on Russian territory has quickly become the new priority target for the AFU, meaning that we'll surely see more of this type of activity into the future, plus everything else. Oh, then also, worthy of a quick mention from the weekend was how the Molkino military base, home to the former Wagner PMC, was also on fire in the Krasnodar Krai region, with Ukraine clearly taking every opportunity to strike every target that it can in a single episode. Then we'll head into the Ukrainian map today, heading into the Donbas, where the biggest changes we saw on the map from the Russian forces extended southwest of Krasnohorivka and northwest of Horivka, into or around the settlement of Hostra, with that one being in the Karakova direction, which appears linked to the lack of gains or heavy setbacks that the Russian army has been having for some weeks now in their attempts to reach Pokrovsk, where they in turn divert some of their attention to the flanks, which is something of a common move that the Russian army is known to make. Now, Ukraine also still holds a portion of the southwest garrison on Russia's main axis of attack, but I would venture a guess that most analysts' expectations of this region at this point is one of diminishing value for the armed forces of Ukraine to hold on to at this juncture after Russia's allocation of large resources over the past 9 months, just hammering into this one sector on the map. Then we'll head all the way up north to the Kursk offensive, as Ukrainian forces have been performing a combination of attacks and consolidation of the central northern regions that head in the direction of Lgov, then right next door at Korenovo, and switching the map where remaining locals in the area continue to speak ill of the Russian forces, stating that all of the shops, gas stations, pharmacies, and surviving residential buildings have been broken into and looted. But even further than that, and it feels almost impossible to believe because apart from the lootings, locals complain about violence against residents, theft of vehicles, and aggressiveness from the Russian personnel entering locals' homes. So the Russian army acts like this no matter where their units are deployed. But as for the front lines, not a great deal of changes over the past weekend, but still with no shortage of activity. For instance, with the Ukrainian Rye unit and their detection and adjustments of HIMARS fire on Russian howitzers and further strikes on the Karij bridge that may or may not still allow small Russian Buhanka vans to pass through, which is all that was getting through previous to now. But as for the larger Gloshkovsky district, this big one here, about 700 square kilometers in size, where it seems that the Ukrainian forces are biding their time before taking, say for instance, the southwest pocket of Tetkino, which is about 20 kilometers or 12 miles away from Russia's main defense line to the north. But having said that, a Ukrainian presence was confirmed about a week ago in this very pocket, as denoted here by the yellow grey zone and orange captured zone just beyond the border. And though it is difficult to see on this map, it is somewhat cut off, this Tetkino area, from the larger Russian collective to the northeast, due to a number of river crossings just beyond the town around this line here, necessitating bridges which are still there. And I am 100% certain that they are on the AFU's radar. Then headed around the map to take a look at a few things there today, because somewhere in the east, Ukraine's 12th Brigade Azov is using specially equipped FPV drones to destroy Russian UAVs. The brigade's operators have successfully targeted various drones including Orlan, Zala, and Supercam drones, as well as the rare strike on a Russian Molnina UAV. Then also on that topic, we saw the interception of another Russian Merlin VR reconnaissance drone during the nighttime. These recon drones, at up to $500,000 apiece, more and more don't appear to represent great value for money for the Russian forces, who more often than not take a quantity over a quality approach. And do note, the location in this still image has been obscured due to the sensitive nature of the location where it was taken down. Then briefly headed back to Russia on the map as a cable manufacturing plant in Podolsk near Moscow is on fire, covering an area of nearly 5,000 square meters. As always, the cause of the fire is under investigation. Then headed way up north into Russia as we saw satellite images of the aftermath of the recent failed test launch of the Russian Rs-28 Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile at the Plesetsk test range. Now, the failed missile test reportedly detonated on site and, further to that, right in its silo, creating a huge crater in its wake. The crater size was about 85 meters wide, which is about 280 feet. So this latest event follows another similar test launch from about 6 months ago, also marked by failure, making you wonder if Russia is afraid for themselves should they ever consider the outcome of a hypothetical launch of a nuclear platform like these. Because it's their biggest weapon in this war. And allow me to clarify that last statement because it's the nuclear threat that is one of Russia's biggest weapons, which is possibly really disconnected from their long-time unmaintained nuclear capability. Then headed across to a bit of news for today, so starting off, the seriousness of the Russian threat is still not lost on the Norwegians, as Norway aims to increase support for Ukraine, proposing an extra 430 million euros this year and providing at least 1.3 billion annually until 2030. Then for something a bit different for a Ukraine hardware news update, as right here we see Ukrainian FPV flight sims as a part of the FPV operator training under the AFU, and in this case going after some Russian helicopters. Modern day training, eat your heart out. Then headed across to another Russian military mobilization blunder segment, as the soldiers of the 30th Motorized Rifle Regiment of the Russian Armed Forces complain about not having enough water, saying that what you can see here from this video is everything provided for about 1,200 men. As a result, they ask volunteers to bring disinfectant tablets so that they can, quote, don't get so sick when they drink from a puddle. And here I was thinking that the Russians drinking from puddles was merely just a few isolated incidents from the past. But given the lack of clean water, it looks to be more of the norm. I bet the Russian military contract posters do not advertise that. Then headed across to a couple of funnies to round it all off for today, guys. So, for the first one, Russian automotive manufacturing is continuing to showcase its decline under the weight of ever-expanding supply chain limitations resulting from economic sanctions. Take, for instance, this latest 2024 Russian Lada Niva four-wheel drive, severely defected by the gear knob installed far too close to the front dash due to the manufacturer having to retool their factories to complete the automotive production somehow. Interestingly enough, previous years of production of this vehicle already had the gear knob located uncomfortably close to the front dash. But when the factory lost some of its extra production capabilities, the completed production is much less refined now, shall we say, and just not able to fit together like it used to. But why it's in a showroom is beyond me. And it only likely got there through a combination of using gears 2, 4, and reverse. Higher revs and really easing into the clutch to reach that second gear. Then to a final funny to round it all off for today, guys. And for this last funny, I wasn't quite sure whether to put it as a Russian hardware update, a mobilization blunder, or just right here, but here we go anyway. As Russia has formed a mechanized battalion from the crew of its only aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov, and deployed them to the front lines in Ukraine. The unit, initially stationed in the Kharkiv region, has since been moved to the Pokrovsk sector, and these developments came to light after a message on Russian social media requesting assistance in locating personnel from military unit 78987 linked to the carrier's crew. So, as you may remember, the Admiral Kuznetsov, withdrawn from service for repairs since 2017, has faced numerous delays due to accidents, fires, and so many technical setbacks, alongside constant changes in contract maintenance providers that are very likely scamming the funding, seeing no chance in restoring this almost sinking ship back to operational status. But as for this latest manpower hunger of Russia's, this unusual formation is quite the sea change for these sailors. But to be fair, those guys must be really good at operating in a smoke-filled environment. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like, comment, subscribe. All of those wonderful things really helps boost out the channel. And I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.